George Washington's presidency. George Washington set many important precedents that defined the era known as the early republic. Some precedents he set were that he only served 2 terms and that he did not argue with political parties. He only wanted 2 terms because he did not want a king. He didn't want a king because we had a bad relationship with the British and their king. As the first president, he set many important precedents for presidents to come. George Washington was one of the greatest generals of the U.S. Army. He trained the Army in Valley Forge from 1777 to 1778. Then he led the U.S. to victory at Yorktown, Virginia on September 3, 1783. General Cornwallis surrendered to the U.S. Army and America was finally free from Britain. Almost everyone wanted George Washington to be president. George Washington ran unopposed for president and was elected unanimously by the Electoral College. Everyone wanted him to be president because he was the general of the Continental Army when they won the Revolutionary War. George Washington was a very well-liked president and was a national hero. I think that George Washington deserved to be elected president because he had so many great ideas. George Washington chose Alexander Hamilton to come up with a plan to fix America's debt. He came up with a 5-point plan that said that he would first establish the nation's creditworthiness. Then he created a national debt by assuming all the state debt. The third thing he did was create a Bank of the United States. And the fourth thing he did was create a whiskey tax. Then lastly, he imposed a tariff. The next important thing that happened was the Bill of Rights was added to the Constitution. The Bill of Rights was written by James Madison in the year 1791. They added the Bill of Rights because the Anti-Federalists thought that the federal government had been given too much power. The Bill of Rights is made up of 10 amendments that protect the rights of the U.S. citizens, limit the federal government's power, and defines the state powers. The whiskey tax in Alexander Hamilton's financial plan was the main cause for the Whiskey Rebellion. The Whiskey Rebellion was the people's reaction to the whiskey tax. The whiskey tax really affected farmers because they would make their grains into whiskey. Then about 500 men attacked the home of a tax inspector, so George Washington led an army of 13,000 men to stop the rebellion. In the end, this showed that the federal government has the power to stop violent protests. After the Whiskey Rebellion was over, the federal government showed its strength by shutting down the violent protests. This showed that the federal government has the capability and the desire to enforce the federal laws. The Whiskey Rebellion was also part of what led to the creation of political parties. Jay's Treaty was necessary for preventing war between the U.S. and Britain. The British and the U.S. did not get along and were about to go to war with them, but then Jay's Treaty was signed in 1795 and kicked the British out of the Northwest Territory. This resulted in 10 years of conflict-free trade with Great Britain. George Washington agreed to this, but Thomas Jefferson and the Jeffersonians didn't. I think that this was another thing that led to the creation of political parties. George Washington gave very good advice in his farewell address. George Washington gave his farewell address in the year 1796. In his speech, he said that he did not support political parties. George Washington felt that political parties would be the thing to divide the nation. He also wanted Americans to not get too wrapped up in international affairs. I think that George Washington was right in not supporting political parties. I think that they are the source of many of the nation's problems.